From broken to brilliant, the radical power of healing in leadership. Have you ever felt like you were slowly disappearing? Not physically vanishing, but watching pieces of your authentic self quietly slip away in meeting rooms, during performance reviews, or in those moments when you swallow your truth to keep the peace. I recently had the profound privilege of interviewing Doris Jackson-Shazier, a visionary whose work is transforming how we think about healing, authenticity, and leadership, especially for Black professionals navigating toxic workplaces. Doris isn't just changing individual lives, she's revolutionizing our entire understanding of resilience and power in professional spaces. Her courage to speak truth in environments designed to silence has created ripples of transformation that continue to expand across industries, touching thousands of lives that might otherwise have remained fractured and disconnected. We've been sold a dangerous myth, the myth that strength means pushing through pain. That leadership requires sacrificing your well being. That success demands leaving pieces of yourself behind. But what if everything we've been taught about resilience is backward? What if healing isn't something you do after you've achieved success, but the very foundation that makes sustainable success possible? This is the revolutionary perspective that Doris brings to her work. She has dedicated her life to helping professionals, particularly Black women, reclaim their wholeness in spaces designed to fragment them. Her approach isn't just changing individual lives, it's reshaping how we think about leadership itself. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you witnessed someone in a position of power openly acknowledge their wounds? When did you last see vulnerability celebrated rather than penalized in a professional context? If you're struggling to recall examples, you're not alone. We live in a culture that equates leadership with invulnerability. We promote people who appear unbreakable, who never show cracks, who seem to glide effortlessly through challenges that would crumble others. But here's what Doris helped me understand: this model isn't just unrealistic, it's actively harmful. True resilience isn't about never breaking, it's about having the courage to acknowledge your brokenness and the wisdom to pursue healing intentionally. For Black professionals, especially, prioritizing mental, emotional, and spiritual health isn't a luxury. It's a revolutionary act of self preservation and a blueprint for transformative leadership. Consider Letitia Clark, founder of the Pink Parachute Diaries podcast. Letitia created this platform after witnessing a disturbing pattern: talented Black women being systematically pushed out of corporate roles while less qualified colleagues advanced. These women weren't just losing jobs, they were losing their voices, their confidence, their sense of self. What made this situation even more painful was the isolation. Each woman thought her experience was unique, that she alone had failed to navigate the system successfully. The silence around their experiences reinforced the idea that they were somehow deficient rather than victims of a broken system. Letitia's response: create a space where these stories could be shared openly. The Pink Parachute Diaries became more than just a podcast. It evolved into a movement where authentic storytelling validated lived experiences and fostered genuine connection. One participant described listening to the podcast for the first time: I felt like someone had been reading my journal. I thought I was crazy that I was imagining the subtle ways I was being undermined. Hearing other women articulate exactly what I'd experienced, I broke down crying, but they were healing tears. This is the power of authentic storytelling. When we share our journeys, including the setbacks and struggles, we create liberation, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who has felt invisible or isolated in their pain. The impact rippled outward. Listeners began documenting their own journeys. Conversations about workplace wellness for Black professionals shifted nationwide. What started as one woman's response to injustice became a catalyst for collective healing. But sharing our stories is just the beginning. Healing requires community, intentional connections with those who understand our unique challenges. Jacqueline Mitchell's Let's Get This Glow Up initiative demonstrates this principle beautifully. Jacqueline recognized that many Black leaders were struggling with generational trauma compounded by workplace expectations that demanded constant strength without room for vulnerability. Traditional leadership development programs focused exclusively on skills and strategies, ignoring the emotional and psychological toll of navigating hostile environments. Jacqueline's approach was radically different. Her program centered mental and emotional well being alongside professional development, encouraging participants to embrace their full identities rather than compartmentalizing their struggles. One participant shared, for years, I thought success meant leaving my Blackness at the door. I became so good at code switching that I started losing track of who I really was. This program was the first time I felt I could bring my whole self to a professional development space. The results were transformative. Members reported increased confidence in navigating difficult spaces without sacrificing authenticity. Many described newfound clarity on personal and professional boundaries. Most importantly, they began redefining what achievement means, moving beyond titles and salaries toward holistic fulfillment. This shift doesn't just benefit individuals, it transforms organizations. When people bring their authentic selves to work, innovation flourishes. When leaders model vulnerability, psychological safety increases. When healing is prioritized, burnout decreases. We saw this play out dramatically during the COVID-19 pandemic. As traditional workplace structures dissolved overnight, many organizations found themselves ill equipped to support employees through unprecedented stress. But in several Fortune 500 companies, employee resource groups led by Black women became critical lifelines. These ERG leaders organized virtual check ins focusing on emotional wellness rather than productivity alone. They facilitated honest discussions about grief, loss, and resilience strategies unique to their lived realities. Participants reported reduced feelings of isolation and burnout, even when external conditions didn't change. What's remarkable is how these grassroots efforts eventually reshaped institutional priorities. Many ERGs secured permanent funding and resources after demonstrating measurable improvements in retention and well-being metrics. What began as emergency response became recognized as essential infrastructure. This is what Doris Jackson-Shazier means when she says healing is a radical act of leadership. When we prioritize wholeness, our own and others, we don't just survive toxic environments, we begin to transform them. But let's be honest, this work isn't easy. Choosing healing in a culture that rewards martyrdom requires courage. Speaking your truth when silence seems safer demands bravery. Building community in spaces designed to foster competition calls for intentionality. The question becomes, how do we begin? How do we move from broken to brilliant? First, we must recognize that healing isn't selfish, it's necessary. For too long, particularly in communities of color, self care has been framed as indulgent rather than essential. But as Audre Lorde famously said, caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. When you prioritize your well being, you're not just helping yourself, you're modeling possibilities for everyone watching. You're demonstrating that worth isn't measured by how much suffering you can endure. You're creating permission for others to choose themselves too. Second, start telling your story, even if your voice shakes. You don't need a podcast or platform. Begin with one trusted person. Name your experiences, acknowledge your pain, celebrate your triumphs. The simple act of articulating your journey helps integrate fragmented parts of yourself. Remember that your story has power beyond what you can imagine. Someone needs to hear exactly what you've lived through to know they're not alone. Your words might be the lifeline someone else has been searching for. Finally, build intentional community. Seek spaces where you can show up authentically without fear of judgment. This might be a formal network like the ones we've discussed, or it might be a small circle of trusted colleagues who understand your specific challenges. What matters is that you're not navigating difficult terrain alone. Community doesn't just provide comfort, it offers perspective, wisdom, and strength when your own reserves run low. I want to circle back to something profound that Doris shared during our conversation. She said, the cracks in our professional armor aren't signs of weakness. They are invitations to rebuild something stronger than before. Think about that for a moment. Those places where you feel most broken, most vulnerable, most exposed, they are not liabilities. They are opportunities, opportunities to heal more deeply, to connect more authentically, to lead more compassionately. This perspective transforms how we view our wounds. Instead of hiding them, we can honor them as teachers. Instead of being ashamed of our struggles, we can recognize them as sources of wisdom. Instead of viewing healing as something that happens after success, we can embrace it as the foundation that makes meaningful success possible. Today, I challenge you to make one bold move toward reclaiming your peace. Not tomorrow, not when it's convenient, not when you've reached some arbitrary milestone, but today. Set a boundary that honors your worth. Share a truth you've been hiding. Reach out to someone who might understand your journey. Create space for healing in your calendar with the same commitment you give to your most important meetings. Because here's what I know with absolute certainty: the world doesn't need more broken people pretending to be whole. It needs more whole people brave enough to acknowledge where they've been broken and committed enough to their healing that they create spaces where others can heal too. Your brilliance isn't waiting on the other side of your brokenness, it's emerging through it right now in this moment as you choose yourself again and again. And when you make that choice, you don't just transform your own life, you become a beacon for others still finding their way through the darkness. This is your invitation, not just to heal, but to lead from that healed place, not just to survive, but to show others how to thrive, not just to reclaim your own brilliance, but to illuminate the path for countless others still searching for their light. The journey from broken to brilliant starts with a single courageous step. Take it today.